What is up, guys? Welcome back to another GeekaWhat video. Now in this one, I'm going to show you guys how to build an awesome 4K gaming PC build that provides top tier gaming performance while also looking fantastic in the process. This is a build that's designed for top of the line gaming, but can even be used for a bit of streaming or rendering too, and features some super high performance, great looking parts. I'll be running you guys through how to put this system together, the kind of performance you can expect a little bit later, and hopefully having a bit of fun along the way. Let's do this. Today's video has been made possible by Intel Gamer Days. Their biggest sale of the year is here, with discounts on CPUs, GPUs, and even gaming laptops. Why not harness the power of Intel Arc graphics with XE super sampling for AI enhanced upscaling and built-in AV1 encoders for video editing and content creation. Plus, with the purchase of a new 13th or 14th gen CPU, GPU, or laptop, you also get a free code for Assassin's Creed Shadows launching this November. Check it out at the first link in the description below. I'm going to start this build off by walking you guys through the parts I've selected and why, and more specifically start with the CPU and GPU combo. Now the GPU in this build is a bit of a big boy. It's the GeekaByte Aero RTX 4080 Super. Now this is one of the best high-end GPUs on the market right now. You may want to consider AMD's 7900 XTX too, but I picked this due to the superior DLSS and ray tracing performance. Something that I know you guys value, and based on publicly available sales data, a card which clearly seems to be that bit more popular. Now this GeekaByte Aero is one of my favorite looking cards as well from the 4080 Super lineup, and we'll unbox this card a bit later to check that out. Now the card pairs up perfectly with Intel's Core i7-14700K. Not only is this chip great for multi-thread workloads with 20 cores and 28 threads, that's comprised of 12 E-cores and 8 of the faster P-cores, but clock speeds are also very good too, breaking easily through the 5 GHz mark. Now I know there have been some issues around these chips running at incorrect voltages, but you can now find BIOS updates which fix the microcode issue for these chips, which I'll link down in the description below. Through Intel's Gamer Days promotion as well, you can also save on this chip over the price it typically retails for, and I'll leave latest pricing and availability, as always, in the description below. Because I've gone for an Intel CPU, I need to make sure that I select a solid Z790 motherboard. Now if overclocking's not really a priority to you, you may want to consider stepping down to the cheaper B-series chipset, but Z790 is going to give us better PCI Gen 5 support, and all in all just a slightly better experience. This particular board comes in from Aorus, and it's the Z790 Aorus Pro X, and it's actually one of my favourite looking motherboards in a sweet minute. GeekaByte have been doing absolute magic when it comes to motherboard designs recently, and this thing is no exception. I mean, look at that for a motherboard. Now this has got a white PCB, which is amazing. The RAM DIMMs are black, but you can see they've got the silver shielding around, which helps them to match better color-wise. Rear I/O is also very strong too. You've got Wi-Fi 7 support, super high-speed USB, and optical audio down the bottom. And the whole thing just looks absolutely fantastic. One of my favorite things about this board though is how easy it is to build with. Not only have you got a toolless heatsink here, which actually uncovers 4 NVMe M.2 slots, but above this you'll also find a secondary toolless M.2 heatsink for the PCI Gen 5 compatibility on this motherboard. That is something we're going to be leveraging in today's build with a Gen 5 NVMe. Talking of which, let's talk about storage and memory and all things flash related. This is the Corsair MP700 Pro SE, and this is a super high-end Gen 5 NVMe drive. Now I want to give a big asterisk that this is totally optional. You may also want to consider a cheaper drive like the MP600 Pro or MP600 GS. This is a top of the range Gen 5 drive that I'm using because, well, it's very exciting and super quick. It's also one of the only drives of its kind that doesn't require a heatsink, but it's expensive. So as I say, the cheaper alternatives will also be in the description below. Now I guess kind of oddly, I've actually made up for some of the cost overspend on the SSD with the memory. This is G.Skill's Ripjaws M5, and it's basically a more slimmed down version of their pretty popular Neo RGB lineup. I still think it looks really quite nice though, but the only way to really tell is get it out of the box. The main things it's got though, which we are after, are 6,000 mega transfers per second as far as the speed is concerned. It's also CL30, so it's fairly low latency and seemingly impossible to get open. Pulling this out, Aha! You can see, not too bad. I wouldn't call it quite low profile, but it's certainly less of a profile than some of their other kits, which are a little bit outlandish. And the top actually looks really, really sleek. When you've got these dims next to each other, I think the design just ties in super, super nicely. And in white, they perfectly match the overall color scheme and aesthetic for the build today. With the motherboard ready to go then, I'm going to start things off by installing the processor. You guys know how to do this by now, just into the socket at the top of the board. RAM or the memories next up. I'm using slots 2 and 4 for this build for dual channel performance, followed by the NVMe, which we need to pop in the top slot as this is Gen 5 and the others are not. With the motherboard looking pretty good, I am just going to prep the CPU cooler before moving the board into the case. Now this is the Phanteks Glacier One 360. Now it might have made sense to try and stick with an NZXT theme, which is what I've done with the power supply and with the case. Kind of spoiler alert, I've already spoiled it now. However, I love the Phanteks Glacier series, and I think these fans look unbelievable. Like, they're so nice. NZXT, rather than going for the fans that kind of magnet and click together, have instead opted for these single uniframe fans, which I'm just not so much of a, wow, fan of. Now this Phanteks Glacier really pleasantly surprised me when I actually got it in for the first time and used it in Phanteks' pretty popular MV5 just a couple of weeks ago. Though admittedly, can't remember how to get into it. It's available in black or white, and you can get it in various flavours in terms of radiator size. They do a 240, I believe a 280, or you can go all the way up to 360, which is what I've done for this build. The 420 is obviously a bit larger too if you've got a case with more clearance and you've got a CPU that maybe needs a bit more cooling capacity. Let's say you're stepping up to an i9 or a Ryzen 9, that's where the 420mm unit is going to be more feasible, I guess. Now then, if I actually go ahead and pull this out, the only thing Phanteks don't do, which other brands are doing, is pre-installing the fans onto the radiator. That will save you quite a bit of time and hassle, but it's not a huge criticism, and for the price, I think this experience is totally fair. In fact, for me, the D30 fans, which are Phanteks' upgraded unit, are actually the biggest value out of this cooler. Lots of high-end coolers just don't come with good fans, and it's good to see Phanteks not making that same mistake. Now what I am going to do is I'm going to prep the fans onto the radiator now. These nicely magnet and sort of clip together. There is a little bit more of an installation process involved on these than on other units, but I don't think it's too bad, and if you can sort the manual as to where the clips go, you'll be fine. Once the fans are on, I'm then going to grab our back plate, which is going to go through the rear of the motherboard, and this little Intel mounting plate, which is going to slide around the CPU water block. Once the back plate's through the motherboard, add on the LGA 1700 standoff screws, and that's pretty much all we need to do before moving into the case. Now then, it is time for the case. And this right here is NZXT's H9 Elite. Now it's been a while since I built in one of NZXT's, I want to say older, but this is by no means an old chassis. They've just recently updated the H5 and H7, and I actually don't know what they could do to make me like the H9 anymore. Now this thing is a total unit, and it's going to work really well for the build today. Now I believe you can get this in a variant that doesn't have any included fans, which might make more sense as I'm actually going to use Phanteks D30s in pretty much the whole build. NZXT seem to be changing their fan branding and designs quite frequently at the moment, so actually ripping these out and putting the Phanteks D30 units in might not be such a bad idea after all. The first thing you want to do with any case is just strip it right down. Take all the panels off, side, top, and rear, just to open it up and make the access that bit more simple. Now, like many of the cases on the market right now, this is a dual chamber chassis. So what that means is that at the back of the case, you've got things like your power supply, your drive mounting, or your cables, and at the front, you've literally just got the motherboard tray and then any radiators you might have in the build. The idea is that this is supposed to make the build look more sleek, a bit more simple, and it gives it that fish tank aesthetic that everybody wants right now. Now, it's built pretty well, and I guess the only thing I would like to see more of is maybe some more rubber grommets on the V2 variant, presuming there is one later this year. The things like standoffs being black is actually quite nice because it gives us a bit of contrast. And again, while these NZXT fans are nice, you could save some money by going for the fanless version, as I'm going to swap these out anyway with Phanteks D30. Always a good idea to double check the standoffs too. You can see this case has 3 at the top, 3 along the middle, and 3 down the bottom. And if you actually compare this to the motherboard, you'll actually see these all match up perfectly. That makes sliding the motherboard in a much easier process, as we know everything is going to line up okay. Get it aligned over the standoffs. This motherboard looks like a pretty good match as well as far as the colour scheme goes, and then use the included screws to secure the board down. 3 at the top. I would say 3 along the middle, but the centre is raised, so 2 along the middle and a further 3 down at the bottom. Next up is the cooler, and what NZXT actually do is they include this removable bracket, which if I pop out, you can see it's going to make the radiator installation a bit easier. I'm going to pop the radiator this way round so that the tubes are coming out the front. And you can see here, if I line it up with the bracket, I can get it installed nice and easily. Top tip, if you just drop the tubes over the end of a table and then line everything up, you're not going to be fighting the tubes and you're not going to be putting any pressure on anything in the radiator that you don't want to damage. Easy to install this into the plastic bracket and drop it into the system in a moment. When I do drop it in, I'm also going to add this little cable harness in, which is going to ensure all the fans get power and all their RGB signals, and this can be plugged up a bit later to a centralized controller. This bracket is going to make the whole thing a lot easier to slide in, but what you don't want to forget to install, which I've totally forgotten to install, is this little cable harness, which is actually going to give the fans all the power and data that they need to get working. So I'm going to slot this in. You guys can't see this super well. However, you can see what it looks like once it's actually finally installed, and that is just going to slot through a couple of the cable grommets down the bottom and tuck away nice and tidy. Now that is starting to really come together. I think what I'm going to do next is actually do some cables and wiring, as that will make installing the graphics card and all the extra fans at the end a little bit easier. Now, talking of power and cables, I've gone for this, the NZXT C850 Gold. And this is one of NZXT's brand new ATX 3.1 power supplies. Now, it's so new, I'm going to need some scissors to take off the plastic wrapping. Oh yes. And I have to say, I'm quite excited about this. As far as power supplies go, this has really piqued my interest. Now, you get the included bag of modular cables. I'm hoping, please tell me this is a white. Please, that's black. That's fine. Oh, yes, baby, look at those. Oh, they look really, really good. And of course, you get the ATX 3 PCI Gen 5 power cable, even better. And then a bag to store them all in afterwards. And then the power supply itself. This looks good on the photos, you know. As far as power supplies are concerned, NZXT, I think you might have smashed this one. Oh, look at that. Wow. Now that, my good friends, is what you call a PSU. Wowee! Got this nice little silver strip, love that. 850, but it's available in various different connectivity standards. I really like the look of that, and super on brand as far as the white colour scheme goes too. Now, as far as what cables I'm going to be using, there are a few to note. So the first is this, which is the motherboard cable. That's a 24 pin. I'm also going to need to grab a SATA power cable. This is great for things like any RGB controllers you might use. Then got the 600 watt rated PCI Gen 5 cable, the one with 16 pins, 12 for power, and then a further 4 for data and communication. And then we're also going to need some CPU power harnesses. No, yes, no, yes. So you can see here we've got a pair of 8-pin CPU power harnesses. That's 4 plus 4 pins, which, as you can see, split apart nice and easily. I love as well these cables are white, but actually with white injection molded end pieces on as well. That is delicious. I'm going to get all of those wired up to the power supply, screw this into the back, and then go ahead and plug in the CPU and motherboard power cables first of all. While I'm here, also makes sense to do the front panel cables for the case. Sadly, these aren't colour matched to the chassis, which is really weird. These are going to be the USB 3 cables for both Type A and Type C, HD audio, which is for the audio port on the top of the case to the bottom left, and of course the JFP1 front panel cables. These are the fiddly pins which go to the bottom right. Once all the cables are done, I'm then going to move on to this. Now this is NZXT's vertical GPU mounting kit, and this is going to be a pretty instrumental part of the build today. Now you might have noticed previously that the PCI lanes in this case are actually missing, and that's where this comes in. Take all the lanes out, swap this in instead, and we can mount the graphics card vertically. Now, you're still going to install it like you would a normal GPU. Instead though, I'm going to pop the riser into the top PCI slot, add this bracket into place, and then grab our 4080 Super Aero. Just look at this thing. It's honestly one of the best looking graphics cards I think you can buy, just full stop. Now this one's completely box fresh, so let me go ahead and get the thing unwrapped. Even got the peel on the back plate as well. Listen to this. What a beauty. It's going to perform great. It's going to be awesome for 4K, 1440p, 1080p gaming, where your CPU is more likely to be a bottleneck. The 14700K is really solid. Now, I would recommend, if you're going to copy this build, doing all of the fans now and the GPU afterwards. But I'm still waiting for a triple pack of the D30s to arrive for the bottom. So I'm going to install this for now so we can see how it looks, then take it out to add in my extra fans along the bottom and replace both the fan at the side and at the rear. I've not just lost my marbles and I'm doing things in the wrong order. Well, I kind of am, but there's a reason. There's method to the madness, okay? Wow, 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 that is a beauty. Bit of cable management to do, need to give the GPU some power, get it screwed in, add those fans, and look at performance in a few moments. But first, I think we all want to see a montage of what this thing looks like when it's actually powered up. That looks unbelievable. Looking amazing. Gotta say, I love the combo of this H9 with those Fantex fans, white motherboard, white GPU. Oh, it's perfect. But how is the performance? Because that ultimately is the bit that really matters. Now, the first game I tested out was Black Myth Wukong at 4K, ultra high, DLSS 3 enabled, frame gen enabled, ray tracing on and set to ultra high. You name it, the setting is turned on at 4K here, and the build did really well. 70 FPS on average. It was a really playable gaming experience. Of course, you could tune ray tracing down or off completely if you want to break through that triple-digit FPS mark, but I was really happy with this. Alan Wake 2 is another RPG title really where you don't need super high frame rates, but we want it to be smooth, we want it to be enjoyable. 4K high settings here, DLSS 3 enabled on quality again, frame gen also enabled, ray tracing on high this time around, and the frame rate clocked in at 71 FPS on average. Alan Wake 2 is such a good looking game when you've got the power to run it, and at 4K, it looks glorious. Call of Duty's Warzone at 4K is a title where FPS really matters, and not just to the point where it's smooth, but to the point where it's competitive too. 4K, high settings, DLSS, on quality, 129 FPS. Yes, baby. Looking good, really competitive gaming experience, nice kills in here too, and just all round a good time. Starfield ups the ante a little bit. It's a harder game to run, 4K, high settings again, DLSS 3 enabled, frame gen on, 106 FPS on average in Starfield. Really, really pleased with that. Again, the gaming experience really solid all around. A title that's had a harder launch than many over the last sort of year or so, but still did well on this system. Hogwarts Legacy at 4K is next up. High settings again, and here the frame rate kind of in the middle of a game so far, 81 FPS, so more than the 70 earlier, but not again through that triple-digit barrier. Fortnite at 1080p competitive settings tunes things right down the resolution rungs and down the settings rungs too. Here, just for fun, the game achieved 315 FPS on average, because of course it did. Finally, to wrap things up, bit of Apex Legends, 4K, high settings, 205 FPS. So the highest out of all the games today at 4K, only falling down to Fortnite, which was tested at the much lower 1080p resolution. What do you guys think of this build? What do you think of the performance, the parts I selected? Let me know in the comments down below. And make sure to get subscribed if you'd like to see more from me. Thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.